Imagine someone hands you a stack of legal briefs. And we're talking Supreme Court appellate level briefs.
Right. The really dense stuff.
Exactly. So you flip through them, and they're mathematically precise. I mean, they completely dismantle a malicious prosecution without breaking a sweat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, citing complex Canadian case law, parsing the really ambiguous grammar of Department of Justice statutes, and, surgically exposing fatal flaws in digital evidence authentication.
So reading that, you'd assume it was written by a senior litigator, right?
Right. You'd think, okay, this is someone with 20 years of courtroom experience. But imagine the author of those briefs isn't a lawyer at all.
That's where it gets wild.
It is wild. She is a multi-genre songwriter, and she's dealing with a terminal illness, defending herself against a corrupt system, all while simultaneously managing an 84,000-person online community.
It creates this immediate cognitive dissonance, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because, we are conditioned to believe that human capacity is heavily siloed. Like, the brilliant, analytical, legal mind is not supposed to be the exact same person who writes deeply vulnerable, emotionally devastating blues and symphonic music.
Yeah, society likes to keep the poets in one box and the tacticians in a completely different box.
Exactly. And today's deep dive is going to completely shatter those boxes. We are looking at a single individual, Stephanie Larocque.
A true force of nature.
Absolutely. She's a songwriter, a community builder, an academic writer, and a self-represented legal advocate. But we aren't just going to read you her biography today.
Right. That's not what we do here.
No. The mission for today, and what I want you, the listener, to really focus on, is examining her integrated neural blueprint. We are going to look under the hood.
Okay, let's unpack this. We want to figure out the actual mechanisms of how someone pulls this off, right?
Yes. We're exploring how a unique cognitive makeup, specifically atypical brain lateralization, a really rare personality architecture, and an intense form of empathy fuels a literal alchemical process.
It's an alchemical process. I like that phrasing.
It fits perfectly, because she takes systemic injustice, parental alienation, and severe personal trauma, and she metabolizes it.
And that word, metabolizes, is crucial here.
Right.
She doesn't just cope with trauma. She doesn't just sit in it, She converts it. She turns that raw, emotional sludge into airtight legal defenses and this incredibly vast, sprawling catalog of original music.
To understand how she accomplishes all of this, we really have to start with the foundational hardware. We have to talk about the neurology of left-handedness.
Which is fascinating because I think most of us just think of left-handedness as, which hand you prefer to hold a pen with.
Right, or needing special scissors.
Exactly. But it is fundamentally a neurological distinction, isn't it? It represents a profound difference in how the brain organizes information.
It is a massive structural difference. I mean, only about 10% of the global population is left-handed. So to understand why this matters for Stephanie, we have to look at how a typical right-handed brain operates.
Okay, walk us through the typical brain.
So in about 90% of people, the brain is highly compartmentalized. It operates on strict lateralization.
So it's kind of like a duplex with a very thick wall down the middle.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it, yes. The left hemisphere of that duplex handles language, sequential processing, logic, the step-by-step mathematical reasoning.
Okay.
And then the right hemisphere is managing spatial awareness, emotional prosody, which is, the ability to interpret the emotional tone in someone's voice, and holistic synthesis, the big picture.
They communicate, obviously, but the division of labor is pretty rigid.
Very rigid.
And what happens in the brain of someone like Stephanie?
Well, the wall in that duplex essentially comes down, or at the very least, it's replaced with a massive set of double doors that are just always propped open.
Wow.
Yeah. Neuroimaging studies, specifically functional MRI research, show that left-handers have a much higher rate of atypical lateralization.
Meaning things aren't stuck on one side.
Exactly. Instead of confining language and executive functions strictly to the left hemisphere, her brain features bilateral functional connectivity. She is utilizing both hemispheres simultaneously to process language, logical structures, and visuospatial tasks.
The crosstalk is just constant.
Right. The traffic across the corpus callosum, which is the bridge between the two halves of the brain, is intensely rapid.
So that rapid crosstalk has to completely change the way she interacts with the world.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if a typical brain processes information sequentially, moving like a train on a track from station A to station B, her brain operates more like a spider web.
That's a great analogy.
You pluck one string, One emotional cue or one logical inconsistency, and the vibration instantly communicates with every other point on the web.
The technical term for what you're describing is dynamic functional connectivity. And it completely explains why left-handers are so heavily overrepresented in music and the arts.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Casasanto meta-analysis on handedness and cognition looked really closely at this. It debunked the older, kind of simplistic myth that left-handers just have a generalized creativity advantage on basic lab tests.
Right. It's not magic.
No, it's structural. It confirmed that the highly integrated bilateral crosstalk is the perfect neurological engine for complex, prolific artistic output.
Because writing a song requires a seamless blend of mechanical mastery, the mathematical structure of notes and rhythm and raw emotional feeling.
Exactly. She is neurologically predisposed to merge structure and emotion, but, that's just the physical hardware.
Right, we have to talk about the software, the psychological operating system.
Yes, she is an INFJ, and for those familiar with Myers-Briggs, that stands for introverted intuition, extroverted feeling, introverted thinking, and extroverted sensing.
Which is universally recognized as the rarest personality type.
It is. And when we talk about an INFJ, we really have to zero in on their primary cognitive function, introverted intuition, or NI for short.
Let's break down what that actually feels like in practice, because this is where it gets really intense for her.
It does. In cognitive psychology, NI is not a magical sixth sense. It is a highly associative, subconscious synthesis mechanism.
It essentially operates as an involuntary pattern recognition engine.
Perfectly said.
Her brain is constantly, subconsciously sweeping her environment and gathering millions of micro data points.
Just running in the background all the time.
Yeah. It's noticing a fractional shift in someone's tone of voice, a tiny inconsistency in a timeline they gave 3 weeks ago, a structural gap in a legal document. She doesn't even have to consciously try to memorize these things.
Her brain just hoovers them up.
And then the synthesis happens. Because she has that bilateral functional connectivity we just talked about, those subconscious data points are instantly routed across both the logical and emotional centers of her brain.
And suddenly, her mind projects a complete, highly accurate map of a system or a situation right into her conscious awareness. It's like the ultimate aha moment, but it happens continuously.
It sounds exhausting, honestly.
It is. When you take the INFJ introverted intuition and run it on the hardware of a left-handed brain, you get a phenomenon the sources describe as accelerated holism.
Accelerated holism. I want to linger on that because she doesn't read a room sequentially.
Right.
She doesn't meet someone and think, okay, point 1, they're smiling. Point 2, they offered me a drink. Point 3, they seem nice.
No, she skips the steps.
She maps the entire underlying psychological structure of that person instantly. And this brings up a massive cognitive trap for her.
The trap of being unable to unsee things.
Yes. If you have a brain that maps the invisible patterns of human behavior,
Right.
the lies, the manipulative dynamics, the toxic social agreements, you are stuck with that knowledge.
You can't just turn it off.
Right. Pretending a pattern doesn't exist just to make a social interaction smoother would require her to actively sever her own internal connection to reality.
And doing so would completely compromise her cognitive coherence. Living this way is profoundly exhausting. And we don't have to speculate about the toll this takes on our nervous system because she documents it meticulously in her music.
She really does. I was just looking at the studio notes for the song Second Sight. It is literal evidence of this cognitive burden.
The lyrics are incredibly revealing.
They are. She sings, "In the quiet of the night, she's wide awake, connecting the dots in a world so loud, she wishes she could turn it off. Leave behind the echo, the whispers, the talk. But the truth paints a picture too bright to ignore."
That specific phrase, "a picture too bright to ignore," is the definitive experience of introverted intuition.
It's so vivid.
It's not a gentle suggestion from her subconscious. It is a glaring, unavoidable architectural blueprint of reality. And further into the track, she articulates the duality of this trait.
How so?
She writes, "For every dot that she sees, every pattern she finds, there's a spark in her soul, a fire that binds."
A fire that binds. It's a superpower, but it's also a leash. It binds her to an objective reality that most of society is actively trying to ignore or politely gloss over, which, transitions us perfectly into how she interacts with other people.
This is a huge piece of the puzzle.
If she has a brain that acts as an involuntary human lie detector, what happens when she walks into a room full of people wearing masks?
It creates immediate friction, which brings us to the psychological concept of the heyoka.
I've read about this in the sources. The Heyoka is an ancient Lakota concept.
Yes, it translates roughly to the sacred clown or the backward walker.
But how does that apply to a modern psychological framework of empathy? Because we usually think of empaths as the people who just want to give everyone a hug and make the bad feelings go away.
Right, the conventional understanding of an empath is someone who absorbs the emotional temperature of a room and instinctively seeks to soothe it.
They want harmony.
Exactly. They will smooth over conflicts and validate everyone's feelings just to bring the collective anxiety down. But the Heyoka operates on a completely inverted mechanism.
They do not soothe.
No, they reflect.
They are an unfiltered mirror.
Precisely. If someone enters a dynamic projecting a polite, socially acceptable persona, but internally they are harboring unacknowledged trauma, hidden hostility, or deceit, the standard empath will try to comfort them.
And the Heyoka?
The Heyoka's very presence, their involuntary mirroring, will reflect that hidden shadow right back into the person's face.
I have to be honest, though. Reading through this, calling someone a Heyoka empath almost risks romanticizing what sounds like a severely disruptive social habit.
I can see why you'd say that.
Like, are we just putting a mystical label on someone who lacks a social filter and blows up comfortable situations? Why wouldn't someone with her level of intelligence just learn to play the game?
Just smile, nod, and make life easier for herself.
Exactly.
It's a fair pushback, and it sounds romanticized until you look at the neurological reality we just established.
Okay, fair point.
To play the game requires overriding your own structural perception of reality. For Stephanie, the brain calculates the cost of self-betrayal as infinitely higher than the social cost of disrupting a room.
She isn't doing it to be malicious.
Not at all. She is neurologically incapable of participating in a comfortable lie without suffering massive internal cognitive dissonance.
She refuses to be complicit in the delusion. And again, we see this mechanism perfectly preserved in her studio recordings.
Yes, she documents the exhaustion of it.
There's a track called The Mirror, where she embraces the archetype completely. I'm a mirror to the world, reflecting what's inside. When the shadows start to gather, I'm the light they try to hide.
She understands the discomfort she causes. She notes how people falter when confronted with the truth they're trying to deny. But she also documents the personal toll.
Right, it's not easy for her.
In the song, The Price of Being Me, she provides an incredibly analytical view of her own social isolation. This is the price of being me, my honesty, overdraft on empathy. Guess it ain't cheap.
Overdraft on empathy. What a brilliant mechanical metaphor.
It really is.
She is talking about empathy not as a boundless magical well, but as an energetic bank account that society constantly drains. They charge her for her peace. They put interest on her heartbeat when she's just trying to breathe.
Which brings us to the fundamental question of survival. If she is constantly overdrawn, constantly bombarded by the unspoken shadows of everyone around her, how does she not simply collapse under the weight of it?
The sources refer to her process as a Pisces alchemical pipeline.
It is a profound archetypal framework. In this context, the Pisces metaphor represents the ultimate emotional alchemist.
The ability to transmute pain.
Exactly. It is the capacity to take the crushing, chaotic weight of human suffering, dissolve it, and transmute it into a structured, universal creative expression.
For Stephanie, songwriting is not a hobby. It is not a casual pursuit of fame.
No, it is her primary, necessary neurological survival mechanism.
It's an industrial processing plant for trauma. Typical brains might try to just sit in the pain or numb it or go to therapy and talk about it sequentially.
But she takes this overwhelming, destructive emotional energy and routes it directly into a creative analytical pipeline.
And if we look at the mechanics of writing a song, it requires her to coordinate the emotional, pitch-based processing of the right hemisphere with the structured, linguistic, rhythmic mechanics of the left hemisphere.
Because she has that high functional connectivity, this integrated act is deeply natural to her.
It allows her to take an agonizing, abstract pain and bind it into a structured, physical artifact, a song.
Right. And once the pain is bound in the structure of the music, it is no longer destroying her internally. It has been metabolized.
And because her emotional landscape is so vast, she needs entirely different musical architectures, different jars, basically, to contain different frequencies of trauma.
She doesn't just stick to one lane.
No. If you listen to her catalog, she jumps genres based on what the trauma requires.
Genre hopping is a hallmark of this alchemical process.
Take the song Cry Low. She is processing the absolute chaos of a shattered world. A simple acoustic guitar wouldn't hold that much emotional density.
It wouldn't be enough structure.
Right. So she uses symphonic, orchestral grandeur, Let the strings cry low, feel the heartbeat of the world. It's massive and sweeping.
Beautiful.
But then, when she's dealing with something entirely different, like this sudden, inexplicable abandonment by a close friend, she pivots to the blues.
All My Blues is a masterclass in this. The blues as a genre is inherently structured to process grief, but her lyrics apply her INFJ pattern recognition to the betrayal.
She isn't just wailing about being sad.
No, she is analytically investigating the pain. How do you erase someone who called you friend? How did the past get rewritten so clean, like I was never in between? These are the clues. These are the cause of all my blues.
She is dissecting the cognitive dissonance of being erased by someone she trusted.
So we have established the blueprint. We have a brain uniquely wired to see invisible patterns, an empathy that mercilessly reflects hard truths, and an alchemical pipeline that turns emotional devastation into structured art.
Now, we have to look at what happens when this highly intuitive, pattern-recognizing machine is dragged into the most rigid, hostile, and corrupted system imaginable.
The systemic crucible. This is where the story shifts from internal psychology to real-world, high-stakes, legal warfare.
Stephanie found herself facing completely false criminal accusations. She was caught in a systemic failure propelled by a man named Michael Broughton.
And the sources are absolutely uncompromising when discussing him. They explicitly describe him as a monster, noting that society fundamentally needs to be protected from his kind.
He weaponized the criminal justice system against her. And in the middle of this terrifying ordeal, the legal professionals she hired to protect her began to fail.
It culminated in a genuinely shocking moment in the courtroom.
She literally fired her criminal defense lawyer.
Yes, a man named Bruce Engel.
On day 2 of an active trial. Let's pause there, because the sheer audacity of that is mind-blowing.
It is entirely unprecedented for a layperson.
You are facing criminal charges. The power of the state is bearing down on you. Firing your lawyer on day 2 is usually a recipe for absolute disaster. Why did she do it?
Because her intuitive pattern-mapping brain saw a structural failure happening in real time. Her lawyer was preparing to let the prosecution amend a legally defective charge.
A null charge. Let's explain what that means for anyone who hasn't been to law school.
Good idea.
A null charge means the accusation, as it is written on the paper, is missing an essential legal element required to actually constitute a crime. It is fundamentally empty.
Exactly. If the Crown proceeds on a null charge, they legally cannot secure a conviction.
And her lawyer was apparently going to allow the prosecution to fix their own mistake mid-trial.
Stephanie's brain, which instantly recognizes structural inconsistencies, identified that her representation was inadequate. She realized the lawyer wasn't protecting her structural advantage.
So she severed the relationship and chose to represent herself.
And this is the pivot point.
How does someone go from writing song lyrics to writing Supreme Court-level legal briefs in under 6 months with absolutely zero formal training?
It defies logic.
I mean, the law is notoriously dense. It is written in a language designed to keep lay people out.
This is the ultimate manifestation of accelerated holism. Remember, her brain does not distinguish between the structure of a symphony and the structure of a legal code.
Both are complex systems built on rules.
Yes. Conditional logic, repeating motifs. Under the extreme pressure of an active prosecution, she applied her musical pattern recognition directly to Canadian criminal law.
Think about how a symphony is composed. You have motifs, you have strict rules of timing, harmony, and counterpoint.
Legal statutes operate the exact same way. They are highly structured, conditional logic trees. If A and B, but not C, then D.
Her brain just swapped musical notes for legal statutes. She was reading the criminal code like sheet music.
And she didn't just learn enough to survive. She mastered the architecture of the law.
She really did.
She spent months poring over case law, statutory interpretation, and the rules of evidence. She took her intuitive realization that the system was prosecuting a structurally defective case based on unverified evidence and translated it into a flawless, deeply disciplined legal strategy.
We have to get into the weeds of this motion for a directed verdict she drafted, because it is a work of art.
It is brilliant.
For you listening, a directed verdict isn't just you standing up and saying, Your Honor, I'm innocent. It is a procedural kill shot.
Right.
It is an emotion you bring after the prosecution rests its case, before you even mount your own defense. You look at the judge and say, even if you believe every single word the prosecution just said, they legally haven't met the basic threshold for a trial to continue.
It requires a surgical understanding of the law to pull off.
And she built this motion grounded in a precise line of heavy-hitting Canadian case law. She didn't just cite one case. She wove together R.V.R. Curie, Cheremsky, Kosakar, Silip, Riebeck, Hasselwander, Gulies, and Zora.
Let's unpack the Arcuri test, just to show how sophisticated her thinking was. The Arcuri test essentially asks whether a properly instructed jury, acting reasonably, could possibly convict based on the evidence presented.
It's a test of whether the Crown has provided some evidence for every single essential element of the crime.
Right. And Stephanie recognized this test and applied it ruthlessly. She checked every single claim the Crown made against the official exhibit list.
On a criminal harassment count, she proved that the communications the Crown was relying on were entirely tied to ordinary family law matters: parenting, child support, court orders.
She demonstrated there were no threats, no physical following, no surveillance.
And the most brilliant part, she pointed out that the complainant himself had testified under oath that he had no fear of her.
Wow.
In Canada, causing the complainant to reasonably fear for their safety is an essential element of criminal harassment. Without fear, there is no crime.
She used Arcuri to say, look, they are missing a foundational pillar of the charge.
She did the exact same thing on a breach count. She highlighted that her recognizance, her bail conditions, contained an explicit written exception allowing for communication connected to family court matters.
She noted that the Crown hadn't called a single witness to establish that her communications fell outside that specific exception.
But she didn't stop at case law. She got into grammatical warfare.
Oh, this part is amazing.
She dug into the Department of Justice's own drafting guidance on the ambiguity of the phrase pursuant to. That because the DOJ's own wording was ambiguous, any genuine uncertainty in the phrasing had to be resolved in her favor, the favor of the accused. She found a loophole in the government's own grammar.
But the defining argument, the thread that unraveled both counts, was her attack on the digital evidence.
Right.
She identified that the Crown had never called a witness to establish the authenticity, integrity, or continuity of the electronic communications the entire case depended upon.
They just submitted printouts without proving where they came from or that they hadn't been altered.
Exactly. She proved they failed to lay the foundational evidence required by law.
The sources note that a practitioner of psychology reviewing her case stated they had never seen anything like it. She is now able to cite case law and statute off the top of her head, rivaling senior litigators.
It is an extraordinary feat.
But imagine the emotional toll of standing in that courtroom, knowing you are right, knowing the system is flawed, and having everyone tell you to just give up. We see that fierce refusal to fold so powerfully echoed in her music from this exact period.
Yes, the track I Won't Plead To. It captures that moment of defiance perfectly.
She sings, "They told me take the deal, but I don't bow, I don't kneel. 56 years, and I still won't yield. I ain't got a license on the wall, but I know lies when I hear them call."
I ain't got a license on the wall. She knows she's an outsider in that courtroom. Her pattern recognition, knowing lies when she hears them, is stronger than their institutional credentials.
And in Too Loud, she offers a searing, systemic indictment of the court system itself. This isn't just about her case anymore. It's about the fundamental failure of justice.
The lyrics there are so heavy.
The law reads like a promise, ink on paper full of hope. But when I knocked on justice's door, it was bolted shut with rope. I brought the truth in tapes and tears. You call it justice, I call it war. This truth's too loud to ignore.
And then there's the sheer grinding endurance required to fight a bureaucracy. The justice system uses time as a weapon.
They drag things out until you run out of money or energy.
In Finding Peace, she captures the exhaustion of this bureaucratic warfare. Stamping file, blue ink on the scar. She's got time you'll never own stacked like files on a judge's throne. This idea we have about the justice system.
Yeah, that it's supposed to be fair and human.
Exactly. We really want to believe that courts are these, sacred spaces of logic and empathy. Like they're built on absolute objective truth.
But they're not, are they?
No, not at all. When you look at the raw mechanics of that specific moment, you realize the legal system operates with this cold, just terrifying inertia.
The schedule is literally more important than a human life to them.
Right. The procedural timeline is prioritized over the biological reality of a human being who is suffocating in real time. It's chilling.
It is. And today we aren't just, imagining this terrible scenario. We're looking at the exact official court transcript where that actually happened. We have hundreds of pages of these grueling court transcripts. And maybe the most powerful part, we have this meticulously crafted catalog.
It really is just an unprecedented collection of material for us to analyze. I mean, it's a masterclass in documentation, really.
How so? Like, how do you mean?
Well, what we have here are basically two completely different languages trying to communicate the exact same truth.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, on one side, you have this sterile, heavily redacted, totally weaponized language of the courts, right?
Right.
And then on the other side, you have this expansive, undefinable language of music and rhythm that Stephanie created. From the courtroom to the piano, essentially.
Exactly. We're going to move from that baseline of absolute raw vulnerability, standing in the face of this crushing legal system. This grueling experience naturally forces a critical question. Why? Why was the system pursuing such a weak, structurally defective, unauthenticated case against her for so long?
It wasn't just an accident. It wasn't just a lazy prosecutor.
No. Stephanie's ability to map macro systems led her to a much darker realization about the nature of her prosecution.
Through her deep dive research into Canadian wrongful convictions, studying cases like David Milgaard, who spent 23 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit, and Donald Marshall Jr., she discovered a chilling legal mechanism regarding civil liability.
Explain how a criminal prosecution acts as a shield.
In most jurisdictions, if you want to sue an individual or the state for malicious prosecution, the criminal proceeding generally must have ended in your favor first.
Right.
You can't sue for malicious prosecution while you are actively being prosecuted or if you have a standing conviction. Stephanie realized that her ongoing, drawn-out criminal prosecution was acting as a deliberate shield for her abuser.
It was legally insulating him from civil accountability.
Exactly.
Once she mapped that structural reality, the entire game changed. It wasn't just about her survival anymore. It was about exposing the mechanism. And instead of internalizing that horror, she channeled it outward.
She took all this hard-won, deeply painful knowledge about how abusers manipulate legal systems and poured it into building Narcissistic Studios.
Narcissistic Studios is a massive undertaking. It is an online community built entirely around coercive control awareness, and it has grown to approximately 84,000 members.
Which is huge.
It is. She is currently in the process of moving this entire community over to YouTube while simultaneously running 4 other distinct YouTube channels.
How does someone who is actively surviving coercive control, fighting a corrupted legal system, and navigating a terminal illness have the sheer bandwidth to moderate an 84,000-person community?
Right. Managing an online forum of 100 people is a headache. 84,000 is a small city.
It speaks to her baseline capacity and her history. The sources note that she has been building online communities since the 1990s, back in the very early days of the internet.
Oh, wow. So she really knows what she's doing.
Yes. So she has decades of practical experience in understanding the architecture of digital spaces, how to moderate them, how to set the tone, and how to create environments where people feel genuinely seen and supported.
But fundamentally, her advocacy with Narcissistic Studios and her songwriting are not separate projects.
Not at all.
They are 2 expressions of the exact same underlying mission, taking difficult, invisible abuse and making it visible, validated, and documented.
The community exists to help people recognize the very patterns of coercive control that her brain maps naturally. Coercive control isn't always physical violence.
This is much more subtle.
It is often 1,000 tiny paper cuts, isolating a victim from their friends, micromanaging their finances, monitoring their communications, gaslighting them until they question their own reality. It is a highly systemic form of abuse.
And systems that rely on superficial evidence often misjudge victims of coercive control, because the victim often presents as frantic, exhausted, or emotionally dysregulated.
While the abuser presents as calm and collected.
Exactly. The system misjudges them based on presentation rather than the factual history of the abuse. Stephanie fights for precision where the system fails.
We see her dissecting the precise, invisible nature of this abuse in her music. Her lyrics are clinical in their psychological accuracy.
The lyrics to The Wreck are a masterclass in describing covert, calculated abuse. You say you didn't plan the wreck, but build it floor by floor. You lit the match with silent steps, then beg me not to walk out that door.
It completely captures that crazy-making dynamic where the abuser meticulously orchestrates the destruction and then plays the victim of the fallout.
And she goes even deeper into the psychology and the spark. When you are constantly gaslit, you start to feel like you caused the damage.
She realized her abuser was projecting his own internal darkness onto her. It's a psychological concept called projective identification.
She captured this exact mechanism in the studio. I was never the spark. You just needed someone else to carry all your dark.
That gives me chills.
It is such a sophisticated psychological insight delivered in a simple, devastating rhyme. And she documents the suffocating presence of an abuser who refuses to let go in the song Let Me Go.
She sings about him jumping into her space, holding on to his cold, dense heart, while she just wants to be left in peace.
Or the moment the Hioka empathy finally breaks through the illusion captured in mask, she writes, he wore a mask painted bright. She saw the cracks in his smiling guise. Love is a mirror and truth will ignite.
So we have the art processing the trauma. We have the legal mind dismantling the system. We have the advocacy protecting 84,000 strangers.
But we have to look at the ultimate catalyst here. What is the fundamental fuel source keeping Stephanie Larocque going?
The answer is deeply heartbreaking, but it is profoundly illuminating. It is her children, and it is a ticking clock.
Stephanie received a terminal illness diagnosis.
As the psychological analysis points out, a terminal diagnosis completely alters a person's cognitive calculus. When you know you have decades left, you might approach a legal battle differently. You might let things slide.
When you know your time is finite, every action becomes intensely focused.
She is fighting against severe parental alienation affecting her two sons, Ross and Jacob. Parental alienation is an incredibly insidious form of emotional abuse where one parent systematically manipulates a child to turn against the other parent.
It involves feeding the children a steady diet of lies, portraying the targeted parent as dangerous, unloving, or unstable.
Ross and Jacob were manipulated. They were caught in the massive storm of their father's coercive control. And this is why Stephanie fights with such mathematical precision in the courts.
Her legal battle is not about winning a petty argument with an ex. It is not about feeding her ego or getting revenge.
It is an intense, calculated maternal protective maneuver. She is spending her finite remaining physical and cognitive energy building an unshakable, legally proven, and artistically immortal record of objective truth.
She wants to ensure that 10, 20 years from now, when Ross and Jacob are old enough to look back, when they are mature enough to question the narrative they were force-fed, they don't have to rely on he said, she said.
They will have a stack of court documents proving her innocence.
They will have a massive catalog of music detailing her love. She is literally trying to outlive the lies through her paperwork and her lyrics.
She's building an archive so they never have to carry the burden of blame that their father tried to project onto them. In her song Best of Me, which is explicitly framed as a direct letter to Ross and Jacob, this mission is laid bare.
What does she say to them?
She sings, "You're the best thing I ever did. I want you to know that I never blamed you for what happened. You were victims too. Manipulated, caught in the storm." She offers them complete, preemptive absolution.
She tells them, things are never as catastrophic as they appear when you're standing in the center of the storm. Distance brings clarity. Time brings perspective.
She is leaving them a roadmap for how to live a life of integrity after she is gone. Mistakes don't end the world. They teach you courage when you admit them.
But alongside that wisdom, you feel the sheer agony of the alienation. In Echoes in Silence, she documents the fading connection. Echoes in the silence where my children's voices fade. Promises written on sheets of sand, erased each time he clenched his hand. He built his walls with words and fear, took their hearts, rewrote their minds, left me reaching through the blinds.
And yet through all of that, the love just endures. In the track Endless, she paints this haunting image of a mother walking an endless night. She sings about folding tiny clothes, stacking letters in cardboard bins for every birthday she missed.
She hoped her kids would hear a song someday, hear every sigh she never could say. They're out there in the dark. She is walking toward their heart.
It culminates in the song That's Enough, where she reaches a point of profound, almost transcendent acceptance. She acknowledges the immense pain. I care so much it tears me apart, but she concludes the thought with absolute resolve.
Even if I'm wrong, even if it's tough, I'll keep on loving. And that's enough.
It is an extraordinary act of selfless, enduring maternal love.
It truly is. Facing a terminal diagnosis, navigating the horrific reality of severe parental alienation, and fighting a corrupt legal system, well, it would be so incredibly easy to become bitter.
Oh, absolutely.
It would be entirely understandable to cheat to win, to look at a system that is playing dirty and decide to sink to their level. But Stephanie's final defining trait, the through line across her music, her community, and her legal work is her absolute, uncompromising integrity.
The sources explicitly mention that friends and colleagues advised her to fight fire with fire. They told her to play dirty because her abuser and the system were playing dirty.
And she absolutely refused.
She stated that doing so would make her no better than the people who were abusing her.
She fights for precision and fairness, even when it would be easier to let things slide. She is navigating a system that completely betrayed her, a life that dealt her a staggering blow, yet she never complains about the raw deal.
She doesn't just sit in the hardship. She processes hard things by building something structural out of them.
And we see a fascinating psychological dynamic in how she protects others in her orbit. Because of her Heyoka empathy, she understands why people fail.
She voluntarily takes the blame to shield those she loves who might not have her strength.
In her song Forgiveness, which is addressed to someone who betrayed her out of a need for their own survival, she sings, "I became the cost of your survival, the price paid for your arrival into light. I forgive you just the same."
She absorbs the blow so they don't have to.
But simultaneously, she refuses to let the system break her. Her evolution from a terrified defendant to a master tactician is complete.
She went from survival writing, just trying to learn the legal system well enough to respond, to becoming a legal force who writes with enough exactness to survive the harshest appellate scrutiny.
She writes and lives like someone who expects to be tested.
Because she was tested constantly.
The system and her ex-husband, where she is systematically erased from her children's daily lives.
And we have to be clear about what parental alienation is. It is essentially the psychological murder of a parent in the mind of a child.
God, that's dark. So how does she fight that erasure? Let's look at the track 58 Hours, which is explicitly about her deep, timeless bond with her oldest son, Jacob.
Yeah, the lyrics here hit you like a ton of bricks.
She sings, quote, "58 hours of war I fought. The moment you cried, I fell to my knees."
She is talking about the literal physical agony of his birth.
Right, and then she pivots to these intensely specific, granular details. She sings, "Mickey Mouse chair, your tiny throne. From broken lips to chocolate milk. From Hot Wheels flying off the shelf."
But that specificity is not an artistic accident. It is a vital psychological defense mechanism.
Please explain that to me, because when I first read those lyrics, I was a bit confused.
Really?
Yeah, because why focus on chocolate milk and Hot Wheels when you are engaged in a massive existential legal war against the state? It almost feels too small scale, you know, like trivial.
I understand why it looks that way, but it's the exact opposite of trivial, because alienation relies entirely on abstraction.
Abstraction.
Yes. To alienate a child, an abuser must turn the targeted parent from a real flesh and blood human into an abstract concept, a monster, a danger, or simply someone who doesn't care.
Oh, I see.
The abuser has to actively pave over the child's actual, real memories with a manufactured, fearful narrative.
And the court system does the exact same thing to her. It turns her into a docket number, scheduling conflict.
Exactly. So what is the most powerful counterattack to abstraction? Specificity. You cannot easily erase the visceral memory of a mother pouring chocolate milk or the exact placement of a Mickey Mouse chair in a room. By immortalizing those incredibly granular details in a song, she acts as an indestructible vault for the reality of their bond. She is proving that her love isn't some vague biological concept. It is built on hundreds of thousands of lived, undeniable moments.
And we actually see this corroborated perfectly in the sworn affidavit of Wayne Reed, a former roommate. You highlighted this part in the stack.
I did. Read what he says.
Reed swears, quote, "Stephanie is a good mother. Her children are her world. What I personally witnessed was the way her household worked, and she tells her kids daily she loves them."
And he even mentions a devastating detail about her dog, Moji.
Yes, who was apparently also taken during the separation. Reed says, "Moji is crazy about Stephanie. He never leaves her side."
Reed's statement grounds her lyrical claims in third-party, sworn reality. She isn't inventing a sanitized, perfect version of motherhood just for sympathy. She is documenting the precise reality that was stolen from her.
But that brings up an incredibly dark reality we have to talk about. If her love is that profound, and the bond was really that strong, how does she survive the psychological agony of knowing her children are currently estranged from her?
It's almost unimaginable.
I mean, I would be furious. I would feel so betrayed. I think most people would eventually lash out and blame the kids for turning their backs on them.
Which brings us to the song Forgiveness. This is arguably the most complex and heartbreaking piece of psychological literature in the entire catalog, because she does the exact opposite of lashing out.
She does.
She engages in radical empathy.
I want to read these lyrics slowly because they absolutely floored me. She dedicates this directly to her children. She sings, quote, "It was never your fault. I always knew you were caught between what's false and true. I became the villain so you could live. You picked survival over truth, protected your remaining youth. I understand why silence came. I forgive you just the same.
What she is doing here is known in depth psychology as shatter work. It's confronting the darkest, most repressed parts of the human experience. But Stephanie is doing shadow work on behalf of her children.
She realizes that for her kids to survive under their father's roof,
Yeah.
in a highly toxic, manipulative environment, they had no choice. They literally had to align with him.
We have to understand the impossible bind placed on alienated children.
Right.
If they actively defend the targeted parent, if they express love for Stephanie out loud, they instantly become targets of the abuser's wrath themselves. The cognitive dissonance of living with an abuser while secretly loving the person the abuser is trying to destroy, it is just too much for a developing brain to handle.
They'd break.
Yes. To survive, the child's psyche adapts. It adopts the abuser's reality. The child essentially decides, Mom must be the villain, because if she isn't, then the person I live with is a monster, and I am fundamentally unsafe.
So they make her the villain just to maintain their own sanity and physical safety?
Yes. And here is where that INFJ pattern recognition reaches its highest, most painful evolution. Stephanie sees this psychological trap perfectly. And instead of letting her ego react, instead of demanding they defend her and prove their love, she willingly accepts the role of the villain in their current narrative.
I became the villain so you could live. My God. It's like she is jumping on a psychological grenade for that.
That's exactly what it is.
She is saying, I will take the shrapnel of your rejection. I will let you hate me so that you don't have to carry the crushing guilt of knowing what you had to do to survive.
It is an extraordinarily rare level of emotional maturity. Most targeted parents, understandably, get trapped. It's a desperate, ego-driven cycle of trying to prove to the kids that they are the good parent. They show up with court orders, they demand visitation, they get angry.
Which is a natural reaction.
Absolutely. But that pressure usually pushes the alienated child further away because it forces the child to confront their own betrayal.
But she releases them from that guilt entirely. In the Narcissistic Studios YouTube transcript, she explicitly states, quote, what my ex-husband did to my children, what he imprinted onto their minds that will affect them for the rest of their lives, that is something I have to live with.
She accepts the horrific reality of the damage, but she removes the burden from her sons. She sings, I forgive you just the same.
Because she understands that their silence isn't a lack of love. It is a survival tactic.
Exactly.
Which forces us to circle all the way back to the ticking clock from the beginning. We have a woman whose physical body is failing from stage 4 COPD, whose blood is turning acidic from hypercapnia, who's fighting a legal system that views her as a procedural nuisance, and whose children are alienated and living under a false narrative. What is the ultimate culmination of her life's work and the rapidly shrinking time she has left?
That leads us to the final track we need to analyze today, Talking to the Wind. This song physically grounds everything we've explored.
The lyrics are brutal in their physical honesty.
They are.
She sings, quote, my breath is short, my lungs are struggling, but I whisper to the breeze, hoping somehow your boys are listening. I'm leaving this world sooner than you know. I'm not doing this for me anymore. I'm doing this so love can find your door.
This is the absolute synthesis of her entire campaign. It clarifies the mission we defined at the very beginning of this deep dive. Stephanie's tireless struggle. The legal documents, the forensic audio analysis, the YouTube videos, the original music, dragging herself to court after needing CPR, none of it is about winning an appeal in 2026.
She knows she won't be here.
Exactly. She knows she might not live long enough to see her children realize the truth. Her COPD is progressive. It is incurable. But she is using every last molecule of her depleting oxygen to lay down a foundation.
The permanent floor of truth.
Yes. She is building a structural failsafe for her children's future mental health. She knows that 5, 10, or 20 years from now, and eventually the cracks in the abuser's narrative will start to show.
They always do.
They will inevitably start questioning the lies they were told about why their mother disappeared. When that moment of terrifying doubt hits them, she wants to ensure they don't fall into a psychological abyss.
Because they will start digging. And when they do, they won't find empty space. They won't find a confusing police report that says it was just a civil matter.
No.
They will find this archive. They will find the music. They will never inherit the confusion because she did the excruciating work of documenting the truth before her lungs gave out.
But I want you to look at the title of the song, Talking to the Wind.
I struggled with that title, honestly.
Why?
At first glance, it sounds like defeat. It implies speaking into a void, like you release your voice into empty air, just hoping that random weather patterns might eventually carry the sound to the right ears. It feels like giving up.
Let me complicate that for you. It is the exact opposite of giving up. It is a strategic retreat to higher ground, fueled by the ultimate act of maternal faith. She is tossing these messages in a bottle into the digital ocean. She sings, quote, "To the wind I give my blessing, to the sky I give my song. May it find you when you're guessing, if my love for you is strong."
May it find you when you're guessing.
She is anticipating the exact future moment when they will doubt the false narrative. She has preemptively answered their doubt with undeniable, melodic proof of her love. It's an act of blind faith that truth eventually has its own gravity.
Wow. We need to take a step back and really look at the sheer way we have just forensically mapped the soul of an INFJ Heyoka empath. We watched a mother use her final, struggling breaths to outsmart a massive, self-preserving institutional machine.
Because she realized early on that courts only document procedures, adjournments, and rulings. They don't document the soul. A judge's gavel cannot adequately measure maternal love, and a police report cannot capture the psychological warfare of alienation. So she bypassed the legal system entirely and built her own archive.
She refused to be erased. She reclaimed her voice in the studio, she took the shrapnel of alienation to protect her kids' survival, and she built a permanent floor of truth.
Which leaves us with a profound, lingering question to ponder as we wrap up.
Yeah.
As a society, we place an incredible amount of faith in our legal and institutional systems to document the definitive truth of human lives. We trust the paper with the official seal on it. We assume the court docket is the ultimate historical record.
But when that system structurally fails, when a mother with failing lungs realizes the court will never truly see her because doing so would expose their own liability, she pivots. She sings her absolute truth into the wind. She records it in melody and lyrics rather than in a sterile legal brief. So I'll leave you with this thought. Does art ultimately outlast the law? Decades from now, when the dust has settled and her children are searching for answers, which record will history and her boys trust more? The sterile, muddy waters of a 2026 court docket, or the clean, undeniable clarity of their mother's song?